Hey everybody, welcome into the back room. I'm Andy Ostroy. We have Frank Bruni back with us today. We'll chat with Frank in just a moment, but first, thanks for tuning in. We appreciate you listening, and we'd love to hear your comments. So email us at backroomandy@gmail.com and or post on our social media, and we'll read some feedback next time. And if you like the podcast, please rate and review and follow or subscribe, and you'll be notified every time we post a new episode. So Frank Bruni has been a prominent journalist for more than 3 decades, including more than 25 years at the New York Times, in roles as diverse as op-ed columnist, White House correspondent, Rome bureau chief, and chief restaurant critic. He is the author of 5 New York Times bestsellers, including his latest, The Age of Grievance. In July 2021, he became a full professor at Duke University, teaching in the School of Public Policy. He currently writes his popular weekly newsletter for the Times and produces additional essays as one of the newspaper's contributing opinion writers. Frank, welcome back into the back room.
Nice to be here.
So let's start with the piece you wrote this week. It's called Donald Trump's Middle Finger, about what happened recently at a Ford factory in Detroit. Talk about what happened and the larger concern that you write about in that piece.
Well, what happened, and it's funny because I think many people will immediately remember that this happened. Many won't, because with Trump, there are so many provocations, so many offenses that they all kind of blur together, or they have the, shelf life of a fruit fly. But he was visiting a Ford plant in Michigan. He was kind of trying to do his whole, I'm reviving the economy, affordability message and all that. But of course, he can never stay entirely on message. And at some point, he was taking a tour on foot of the factory. And I guess there were, workers in various places assembled to watch him. And some man shouted out what sounded, from the very kind of imperfect, rough, let's say crude footage, what sounded like pedophile protectors, what someone said. And as he was reacting to it, the kind of grainy, bad, cell phone footage shows him flipping the bird, showing the middle finger to the person. At this point, I don't think that shocks anybody, but that's why I wanted to write about it. This is a man, Donald Trump, who is in the highest office in the land, on the globe, probably the most powerful person in the world, in charge of the world's mightiest military, as he constantly likes to remind us. And maybe the world's richest economy, depending on how you measure it. Some people put China number 1 now. But he holds an office of great dignity, of great import. And he's literally flashing the middle finger at someone. And I should add, because I've forgotten this, You can't hear him, but you can see his lip movements. And you do not need to be a lip reader to know that he's also saying F you to the person, the president of the United States. I just think when that happens, when that kind of thing happens, because that kind of thing happens strangely frequently, we should never let ourselves become so inured to it that we don't pause and note it at times, dwell on it, think about what it means that this is how our president behaves. And in this case, I think it means a whole lot. And what I wrote was that in that gesture, you see so much of this president and you see so much of this presidency. I mean, that is his basic attitude to anybody who doesn't disagree with him. Who doesn't agree with him, excuse me. And that's really, really different from his predecessors, even if his predecessors were often just giving lip service to the following notion. They traditionally said, I'm the president for all Americans. It was almost a kind of reflex, a tick, that after you were elected, you would say something along the lines of, I'm speaking now not only to the people who voted for me, but to the people who didn't vote for me. I'm everyone's president now. I care about everyone's welfare. Donald Trump, not just with that middle finger, but often with his words, says, I don't care about you if you're not a fan of mine. If you don't applaud me, if you don't kneel before me, I have no use for you. And that's what that middle finger was really about. And that is kind of revolutionary for a president, and it's just not okay.
Yeah. Well, I want to read something you wrote in that piece. You said, quote, Trump's middle finger is the exclamation point punctuating his inability to tolerate any dissent, receive any criticism, shrug off any insult. Coupled with that defensiveness is an insatiable need for affirmation and adulation. I'll add that there's also crippling insecurities and a constant need for credit. And all of it is essentially the motivation behind everything he says and does, no?
I think you're totally right. We are in the grip. We are vulnerable to And we are hostage to one man's fragile, tortured psyche, that man being Donald Trump. And I mean, I think, you could write an entire history of the presidency in which you connected various priorities and policies of presidents to their psychological makeup. They are all doing more than just governing all of us. They are all responding to and acting on their needs as human beings because they are human beings. But I don't think we've ever seen that to the degree that we see it with Trump. I mean, the presidency for him, being in public life, is like one long therapy session to make him feel better. And just 2 days after the column you quoted from appeared, I sat there, as I'm sure you did, and as I'm sure many of your listeners did, watching him on the stage in Davos. And it was that kind of dreary, embarrassing, cringeworthy amalgam of here's how great I am, here's how little you appreciate me, here's how thoroughly I can dominate and bully you should I choose to. Aren't you lucky I'm not doing that? Maybe you should be nicer to me. I mean, this is like psycho stuff. And I can't, I'm 61, and in my adult lifetime, I can't recall any president in any circumstance, in any circumstance talking the way he does and kind of showing that much anger and need and vanity and insecurity.
It is astounding. It's such an attack on our senses every single minute of every single day. But then every once in a while, you got to just stop and go, this is a guy who has been elected to the highest office twice. I mean, there's only 45 other people who have done that. He is a billionaire who's now, because of his grifting as president, has more money than he's ever dreamed of having in his life. And he escaped all of the open prosecutions that existed at his inauguration. You would think this is a guy who just sits back at the end of the night with a cigar and a glass of wine and is like, man, I'm on top of the world. Yet, to your point earlier, that man, the president of the United States, leader of the free world, supposedly, the commander-in-chief of the world's greatest army, can't take a slur from a United Auto Workers Union member. I mean, it is unfathomable. And I'm 66, and like you, I have never seen anything like this from any politician. But it makes you wonder, where does this go? What are his limits? Does he have any limits?
Yeah, I don't think he has any limits. No, I don't think he has any limits. And what makes that scary, even scarier, is he doesn't, and this is an observation that's been made before. I don't pretend this is original, but I do think it's essential and important. He doesn't have what he had during his first term in the presidency, which is some people around him who are kind of concerned about the very tendencies you and I are talking about. And many of them wanted to be there in part because they wanted to protect America from Trump and protect Trump from himself. Now he just has sycophants. Now he just has henchmen, and acolytes. And that's not what you see. I mean, I listened to someone who, you look at his resume and his background, and you think Scott Bessent was a fairly normal person before Trump made him Treasury Secretary. At least seems so. And now, like every time someone criticizes Trump, Scott Bessent goes on the warpath with crazy talk that rivals Donald Trump's. He is absorbed. That's the culture around Trump at this point. Those are the terms. That's the deal you make. Those are the terms of your service. Those are the prerequisites and the demands of your job. And so it's not just that we have to worry about Trump's lack of limits and his tendencies. We have to worry just as much about the fact that there are no proximal restraints on him the way there once were.
Yeah. And even more terrifying, the government institutions that we used to rely on to get the bad guys, the FBI, the Department of Justice, they are in that same bucket that you just mentioned, the sycophants who, Trump used to famously say, I want my Roy Cohn. Where's my Roy Cohn? Well, now he's got the Attorney General of the United States and the entire Department of Justice as his Roy Cohn, and FBI as well. So the other thing that is scary is that you express concern over what might happen between now and the midterms. And in the piece you write, quote, will diminished vigor and a ticking clock yield expanded ambitions and compensatory displays of strength? Will his hunger for more ostensible victories, for more recognition, for just plain more, intensify along with the prospect of political enfeeblement? It's a scary proposition to think about this maniac and what he will do before the next free and fair election.
Well, will they be free and fair elections is the important thing
Well, it's
about
a
what you
chicken
just
and egg
said.
thing, right?
Yeah, I think anybody who talks about, and kind of makes projections about the midterms, and is dwelling primarily in the realm of normal historical pendulum swings and, public opinion polls, I think is deluding themselves somewhat. I see nothing about Trump's behavior, and you could just look at the last couple of days with the Greenland threats and then the Greenland retrenchment, whatever. I see nothing about the way Trump behaves or his demonstration of his ego needs and other needs that suggests that he wouldn't do anything and everything he could possibly do to make sure that the midterm results don't leave him a lame duck president. I mean, the gerrymandering we've seen, which Democrats have been able to counter somewhat, is just the beginning of it. He's done all this stuff that I think has flown under the radar, and occasionally you see writers starting to kind of gather it, but it's a direct attempt to sort of buy voters that goes beyond the normal political favors. Money to farmers to make up for the soybean, disappointments with China. He talked the other day when he was in the White House briefing room giving his kind of year summary of his first year, where he said, "God is proud of me." He has a direct line to God, and he knows that God is proud of him, which is great. I don't know what God thinks
Wait,
of me.
I thought he was God.
Yeah, well, that's very well said. So he was basically letting you know he's proud of himself, which is a shocker. Who could have guessed that? Right?
That tracks. That really tracks.
Yeah, but he talked about he once again said tariffs were genius and tariffs were great, and we were all living in the Shangri-La of tariffdom and all that. He raised the prospect of sending all Americans a $2,000 rebate check. I don't know what you call it for tariffs. That sort of thing is going to happen again and again in terms of he's going to try to identify where he's losing votes, and he's going to try to find these kind of these fixes, these near-term fixes that go beyond the bounds of what a president normally does or is supposed to do, that may not be constitutional, but he'll let the courts figure it out later, just to make sure that he is kind of essentially purchasing the votes that his party needs so that he is not kneecapped for the next 2 years of his presidency. He and the Republican Party have talked in various states and in various ways about trying to essentially federalize elections, trying to kind of make it more difficult to vote. I mean, there is a multi-pronged concerted effort to kind of give his party an advantage beyond the normal advantage, so that he doesn't, in fact, have to answer to the will of voters or get a kind of honest referendum on the first year, at that point, 2 years of his presidency.
Mm-hmm. And all that stuff is scary, and justifiably so. But on any level, do you worry about what he's doing now or attempting to do and has done with National Guard, with troops on the streets, as just sort of like a precursor to the kind of militarization he might try to pull on Election Day?
Oh yeah, I think for sure. And we even saw last election day there was a lot of talk about, kind of Republican. I don't know what the right kind of noun for the groups are, but kind of showing up at polls, intimidating voters.
Right.
I think there's a really good chance he's going to wed. Listen, all of these complaints over the years, and we're going back now to 2016, because remember, even before his surprise victory in the Electoral College over Hillary Clinton in 2016, he was talking and talking and talking in the final weeks of those elections about how the election was corrupt, it was rigged, how the results were not going to be trustworthy. And then, of course, the results were trustworthy when he won. And but he's now a decade into telling Americans that elections are not trustworthy unless he wins, and that they should not have any faith or trust in this process. You wed that to his itch, his proven itch, his demonstration, his desire to, and his habit of deploying force, deploying troops, deploying troops, deploying force. I think you wed those two things and you have a vision of what the polls could look like in early November when the midterms come along. Now, I think there are some rays of hope. The public, I think it's not like, even when he denies it or spins it, it's not like he's completely oblivious to what the public thinks. It's clear that he and his administration understand that the killing of Renee Good and the chaos in Minneapolis has not looked good for them and has not played well with voters, and that more voters blame them than blame local officials in Minneapolis. And to that end, in the last 48 hours, you've heard much toned down rhetoric from J.D. Vance about this. He's no longer talking about absolute immunity for all ICE agents. That is noteworthy, and that is a ray of hope that he is aware that there is a going too far that comes back to bite him.
I've been saying for a couple of weeks now that I think that the administration will eventually bow to pressure, public pressure that's in the media as well, and bring on Minnesota state and local authorities to have a much more impartial, independent investigation. Do you think that's going to happen? Or given what he has said and what's come out of the Department of Justice, they're just doubling and tripling down and this thing is done?
I don't know that they will link arms and say, let's all go to the bottom of this. I don't think it's possible. I think it's too antithetical to the way they do everything. I mean, we're seeing right now that the Office of Management and Budget, Russell Vogt and Company, are investigating, 13 Democratic controlled states,
right,
for fraud and all of that. They're investigating the mayor of Minneapolis. They're investigating, I think, Tim Walz or whatever. I could see them not going anywhere with that. I can see them having threatened that, having taken baby steps in that direction, just kind of letting it all slide, whatever. I can't see them literally singing Kumbaya and saying, this is too important for partisan differences. Let's link arms, join forces, and come to a bipartisan conclusion about what happened here. I don't see that happening.
It's just such a bad look. I mean, we learned that the shots that were fired, apparently one hit her leg, one hit her arm, and then another shot hit her on the side of the head. And, you don't need to be Elliot Ness to figure out that, it was probably that third shot where he pointed right into the side of her window. We see that he shot her when his life wasn't threatened. I just wonder if it's just too much of a bad look that they can't, to just go, nothing to see here, folks, move on, no investigation. And we're going to investigate her and her wife, Becca.
Well, I mean, it's what they've done, and they can kind of stop where they are. They can not follow through all the way, but I don't think you're going to ever see them actually kind of do a U-turn and kind of admit that they went too far, admit that it was morally reprehensible for Kristi Noem, the Secretary of Cruelty, and others around her, to demonize and slander the victim of all of this. One of the things to remember, and one of the reasons why a bad look is often survivable, is we're all in different media and information ecosystems, right? The things that you're saying about the three shots, the points that you're making about what they did wrong here and how bad this looks. If you're in a different information ecosystem, if you've curated a different menu of news influences and all of that, you're hearing a much different story. You're not seeing video or hearing analysis that talks about three shots, none of them being necessary, or certainly number 2 and 3 not being necessary. You're not learning or being exposed to any contradictory evidence, to any naysaying. You're basically part of a cheering squad cum cult that has decided on a different reality here and has constructed an information news universe where nothing threatens that decision or challenges your version of events. We are living in a country where people occupy utterly different realities. And so something looking bad, I'm not sure anything looks bad across the ideological spectrum. It looks bad to the people who are receptive to seeing something bad.
The only thing I will say, and it's in response really to what you said earlier about between now and the midterms, and he starts to identify little pockets of opportunity where he thinks transactionally or strategically it's going to benefit him politically. We know that Donald Trump is loyal to no one. We know that from J6 and just reliving it again yesterday through this hearing with Jack Smith. We saw the videos. We know what happened. Right? We saw people beating the crap out of cops. He doesn't care about cops. He has disrespected and demeaned the police over and over and over again. Is it really so off-brand for him to just throw that cop under a bus if he thought that it's going to benefit him? I'll be the good guy, right? I'll start the fire again, and then I'll put it out like I always do. And what he always does is when his team of sycophants does what he wants, sometimes he then throws them under the bus. And you know what? Let's investigate.
Yes. He is capable of any magnitude or degree of inconsistency, and he is capable of any magnitude or degree of of disloyalty, and he will turn on a dime. But I don't think throwing that cop under the bus is going to be something he's ever going to see as politically advantageous, because that particular turnaround, given his base and given what he's told his base about this, to like, he will throw any aide under the bus. He will say the opposite of something he said 5 weeks ago and claim that there's no inconsistency, but he keeps his eye very carefully trained on his base. And I don't think his base would forgive or abide him doing that in this instance with the ICE agent.
Mm-hmm. There was something else in your piece that you wrote, which I thought was interesting in terms of his psyche. And that was, you cited the memorial for Charlie Kirk, where his wife said, "I forgive the murderer," which I thought was pretty amazing, honestly. And then Trump said, I forget how he segued, but he was standing there on stage with her. And
he said that Charlie Kirk was a better person. I mean, there was actually a sweet part of what Trump said, which is why forgive me for interrupting, because I myself have sometimes reduced this and missed. There was a part of what Trump was doing that was actually quite sweet. He was praising Charlie Kirk for loving his opponent.
Yes.
And he was saying, "I, Donald Trump, hate my opponent." And so weirdly, there was an aspect of that remark that was charmingly and uncharacteristically self-effacing. Mm-hmm. But you're still left with someone who's willing to say, without apology, "I hate my opponent."
Right.
And he does.
Yes, and his actions, and politically and judicially, that becomes very clear. You did also write something else, which I literally burst out laughing when I read it. You said, quote, "I watch and listen to him and get the sense of a man stuffing himself at the buffet before it's taken away." That's quite an image.
Well, I mean, that goes back to, he is aware. And we know he's aware because he's talked about it. He said to her, when he recently talked within the last couple of weeks to gathered House Republicans, he said, you guys got to get out there. You got to stump. You got to really bring your A game, because if you don't maintain control of the House, they're going to impeach me. So he's not living in la la land when it comes to that sort of stuff. He's aware that his presidency could change entirely if the midterms don't go his way, despite all the things he will do to try to kind of contrive a victory, things that he shouldn't be doing. And I also think, despite all the kind of joshing around about a third term, I think he also recognizes that there's not much possibility. I wouldn't say it's impossible, who knows these days, but that it's highly, highly, highly unlikely that he's got another term beyond this one. And he wants more. He wants big. He wants Venezuela. He wants Greenland. He wants all of this. And I think at some level he's aware that he may have, 9.5 months left to get all that stuff. And so I think he's on a kind of bender.
Interestingly, though, he also seems to be more accepting lately of the prospect of Republicans losing the House and him being in that situation. Like, he made a comment the other day that, typically, and maybe it's even psychologically, voters always vote out the incumbent's party in the first midterm. So it's sort of like when you listen to him talk, you could think, oh, he's going to send in the military to steal the election. And then a minute later, you might be like, oh, he's just an old feeble guy who's already throwing in the towel. Like, he knows what's going to happen. And he's just all bluster all the time. And none of that's going to happen. I vacillate between the two.
I didn't hear that as throwing in the towel for the following reason. I heard it as, because this is something he does all the time, I heard it as the beginning of making excuses for why, if things don't go his way, you should not view that as any diminution of him. That it's not about him, it's about these forces beyond his control. However, you are right that we've had these bizarre, scattered, but recurring moments when Donald Trump, of all people, seems introspective. I mean, the big one being 6-7 months ago, I lose track of time, where he kind of talked about whether he would get to heaven or not.
Right.
And how, he kind of sometimes thought maybe he should do some nicer things to get to heaven. I mean, that was when I'm like, did an alien just inhabit Trump's body? He's talking about morals and soulfulness. But then this is the same guy who, when you asked him, when the 4 New York Times reporters were in there interviewing him just a couple of weeks ago and asked him what the limits to his power were, he said, my own morality, my own mind. Well, his own morality means no limits, because I have like you, I've been watching him for many years now. I've yet to detect any conventional morality in the man.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. If I was sitting down with him, I would say to him, spare yourself a lot of anxiety and frustration. Number one, you're never getting a Nobel Peace Prize. And and two, you're not getting into heaven. That's just not happening. Okay. I mean, I'm not a religious man. I'm not sure I believe
you're mean. You're going to crush the man. You're just going to crush the man.
I might get the middle finger. I probably would get the middle finger.
Next thing you'll tell him Melania's documentary is going to bomb at the box office. What's wrong with you? You're such a hater.
You know you're going to watch it, right?
The Melania documentary, yeah. I can honestly say, as God is my witness, life is too short and I am too proud to watch the Melania documentary.
I've been asking all my friends, are you going to watch that movie? Be honest, are you going to watch that movie? And I get the same answer. I won't watch it. I'll watch just about anything, but I'm not watching it.
I can't believe it's being put out there as like a real movie. I mean, there I am the other day, just kind of calmly and hopefully, sitting waiting for Song Sung Blue to begin at the multiplex. And I get a trailer for the Melania documentary. And I'm thinking to myself, do they really think anybody in this theater who's here to see Kate Hudson and Hugh Jackman is going to be baited by and come back to see Melania pose for 2 hours? I don't think so.
Yeah, look, I got a little experience in the film business. I made a documentary. It's on HBO. The fact that Amazon gave $40 million for that movie is insane. Somebody should just smack Jeff Bezos for that. I mean, that is just criminal. But it is interesting because we are going to see numbers. Like, we're going to know whether it's a bomb. And if it bombs, think about the optics of that. Think about the discussion in the media and how it gets back to him and how he's going to tweet about it at 3 a.m. And I mean, why? It's like asking for trouble.
He's going to say that Amazon Studios bungled the distribution. He's going to say that just his polls are lies, that the box office numbers are lies, that everybody he talks to says it's an unbelievable documentary, and doesn't Melania look beautiful? Because that's what he cares about. That's what he's going to say.
Fake news.
Fake box office returns.
So give me your take on the hearing yesterday. Do you think it was a backfire? Why would the Republican Party want to give Jack Smith a platform to talk about January 6th over and over again?
I think they hoped two reasons. One, it is part of an ongoing campaign that never ends to show Donald Trump, to show the president whose wrath they fear so much and whose favor they seek so much, that they have bought into his January 6th revisionism and that they are dutifully trying to exact vengeance and embarrass and put on the spot all the people whom Trump perceives as his tormentors. So they're putting him on the spit for the president who's watching. But as you said, I mean, putting him on the spit did not make him to a normal person look bad. I could not admire that man more. I mean, he's going through the tortures of the damned for doing his job in an ethical and valiant way. And what really bothers me more than Republicans in Congress not being moved by that and in fact trying to make his life worse is how can so many voters not see that? I mean, Jack Smith over here, Donald Trump over here, listen to the men, listen to the two men, listen to whom is speaking. Listen to whom is using evidence and whom is using vitriol. Measure their bearing, their tone against each other. And how can you tell me that Donald Trump is the victim and that Jack Smith is the villain here? That's just that perception is out there is just it's beyond depressing.
Well, it's also about what happened yesterday. You could say the same thing that you just said and say, if somebody objectively is watching that hearing yesterday, you see Jack Smith, for all the reasons you just said, who he is, good, decent, kind man, upholding the rule of law, trying to put the bad guys away. Democrats came into that hearing, one goal, further expose the truth about January 6th. The Republicans clearly came into that meeting with three goals: impugn his character, rewrite history, and further the cover-up for Donald Trump. And the hope, my hope, and I guess the hope of a lot of people, is that the viewers at home watching that saw that in the same way you just described, how they will look at Trump versus Jack Smith and make those same conclusions. Because I think that can really move the needle if that happens. I don't know if it will, but that's the hope.
There's one problem with what you just said. Viewers at home watching that. How many viewers watching it?
Yeah.
You know, I mean, and I say this, and this is a mea culpa, those of us who are kind of swimming in the news, who are talking about it on podcasts, who are writing about it, we extrapolate from ourselves and we assume a kind of level of intake and information among people. We're exotic. We're the freaks. And I don't say this. I don't say this censoriously of people. I mean, they're living their lives. They're trying to get the kids where the kids need to go, make the money they need to make to like pay all the bills. If you kind of stopped most Americans and said, "Hey, that was some Jack Smith testimony today," they'd say, "Who's Jack Smith? What testimony? What are you talking about?"
Right.
And again, I'm not saying that critically. That's just the reality.
You're right. That's the sad part. Well, that might explain why he was elected twice to the highest office in the land. Good point, Frank. Thanks for all your insights as always, and do come back and chat with us again.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Take care. This episode was produced and edited by me, Andy Ostroy. It was co-produced by Maddie Rosenberg and Jen Hammoud for Radio Free Rhinecliff, with additional editing by Maddie Rosenberg, music by Andrew Hollander, and graphic design by Cricket Langell. And with a special thanks to our sponsor, The Epicurean. Again, thanks for listening. Please rate and review wherever you get your podcasts, and subscribe to the Backroom with Andy Ostroy YouTube channel, where you can watch full videos of our interviews. See you next time.